Hi, everyone. Professor Sackett-Taylor here with another video lecture from Principles of Macroeconomics by Kopic and Mateer. This lecture focuses on Chapter 7, talking about unemployment. Prior to this chapter, we looked at how we use GDP, gross domestic product, as a measure of economic well-being. GDP, just a reminder, is the market value of all final goods and services produced within a specific country at a specific period in time. It can be broken down into consumption, investment, government purchases, and net exports. We find real GDP by adjusting nominal GDP for inflation using the GDP inflator, which is a price level index. We experience what we call business cycles. These are short-run fluctuations in economic activity that can overall cause output or production to be above or below the long-run trend. What we're going to look at today is one of those short-run trends, which is unemployment. Typically, unemployment is considered to be a drain on society, and it can be very difficult to be experiencing unemployment as an individual or as a household. However, as the economy changes and progresses, jobs are created and jobs are destroyed. So what we're going to find out here in this lecture is that not all forms of unemployment are undesirable. But we are going to look at the major reasons for unemployment and specifically think about how we can use unemployment data to assess an economy's well-being. There are three types of unemployment: structural, frictional, and cyclical. We're going to look at the different ways we can interpret these unemployment numbers and the shortcomings of this measure when thinking about using it to assess economic well-being. Let's start by defining unemployment. Unemployment is when a worker who is not currently employed is actively searching for a job, but without success. The person has to be out of a job. Being unhappy in your job and looking for a better one doesn't count as unemployment. Also, if you're not currently employed, but not actively searching, you're also not included in the unemployment number. The unemployment rate is an important indicator of an economy's health. It can be calculated as the percentage of the labor force that is currently unemployed. Since 1960, the average unemployment rate for long-run trends in the United States has been hovering around 6%. We did see much higher unemployment during the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, and most recently, we've seen extremely high unemployment as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, 2021. When we compute the unemployment rate, we divide the number of unemployed by the total labor force and then multiply one by 100 to turn it into a percentage. So let's talk about those three distinct categories of unemployment. The first is structural unemployment. Structural unemployment is unemployment that's caused by changes in the industrial makeup of the economy. The cause of it is a concept we call creative destruction. Structural employment creates short-run problems for transition, but it's actually a sign of a healthy, growing economy. It's caused by changes in the types of industries that evolve over time as we develop new production processes and technologies. It often is used as a measure for representing our technological progress as some jobs become outdated. But it does create trade-offs because some jobs are destroyed and those are real people's lives. So creative destruction happens when a new technology creates new jobs while destroying old ones. This is a term that was first coined by Joseph Schumpeter, and it was really describing an evolutionary process in economic growth and development. New industries are created, replacing old ones. Unfortunately, it does lead to unemployment, but it's a sign of a healthy, growing economy. Think, for example, right now of the book industry. As we've become a culture and a society that operates more in an online context, we've moved to ebooks and, audible reading. I know I listen to a lot of books out loud, what used to be books on tape, but now are recorded as MP4 files. And we tend to carry around readers like Kindles instead of physical books. This is an example of creative destruction. The electronic book industry is replacing the physical book industry. And so a lot of bookstores are not doing as well as they used to, and this is creating unemployment in those sectors. Over the past 200 years, if we were to look at long-run trends, we can see that jobs in the United States have evolved from originally being primarily agricultural, then to being primarily industrial, and now to being primarily found in the service industry. We've moved from the fields into factories and now into office buildings, and increasingly, we're moving our jobs online. In 1979, for example, manufacturing employment in the United States had fallen from almost 20 million to just about 11 million. And over that same period, employment in the service providing industries rose from 65 million to 112 million. Today, 5 out of every 6 US workers are employed in a service providing occupation. It's not desirable to eliminate structural employment altogether, as that would mean that our economy is not evolving. But instead, the government can develop programs to help those that are hurt the most by creative destruction. First, on the worker side, the employee side, workers have to be willing to retrain, re-educate, relocate, or change expectations about the work they do and the pay they receive. But the government can step in and help by providing training programs and relocation subsidies. One recent policy proposal made by a number of politicians who have been in the news lately is that we should be providing free community college to the residents of each state. If this was true, then people could more easily get the education and training that they needed to switch into the new industry as it evolves, and we would see overall less unemployment. So here's an example. All 3 of these are versions of unemployment, A, B, and C, but which one is an example of structural unemployment? Here, structural unemployment is Alfred, who was a VCR repairman and is now unemployed because very few people still own VCRs. The structural employment here is caused by changes in the industrial makeup or the structure of the economy. So old technology was replaced by new. Moving on to the second category of unemployment, frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment is considered natural and efficient by most economists. It allows job seekers to efficiently match their skill sets with available jobs. Frictional unemployment is that time, that delay between the person seeking a job and the person finding the job that they want to actually take. No matter how healthy an economy is, there's always frictional employment. When you graduate from college, you are most likely going to need to take some time to determining what's the best job for you. You won't be interested in just any job because now you have a specific skill set and you'll want the best job that matches that. On the other side of the job market, employers are rarely hiring the very first applicant they see. So when they post a position, it takes some time for them to find the right person. These time lags are what creates frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment is caused by time and resources that it takes to do the matching between employer and employee. How fast employees start in their new job often depends on how fast the employees and employers can find each other and the incentives for how they find each other. Information availability tends to shorten job searches, and employees can find relevant and desired jobs more quickly, and the employers can more effectively filter the list of candidates to find their desired hire. This is where online job forums like LinkedIn and Monster are really helpful in reducing frictional unemployment. Government policies can also generate positive and negative incentives that affect both employees and employers. So specifically, we're looking at unemployment benefits provided by the government. This factors into the length of time that people will take seeking a new job, because they can be carried over by unemployment benefits. Here's an example of that, of the difference in government policies. During the early 2000 teens, Spain had a much more progressive policy around providing unemployment benefits and assistance to those who were currently unemployed and seeking jobs. And so what we see is that their unemployment rate actually remained higher for a longer period of time than a similarly developed economy in the US. Today, most job searches are done online, and this has made the job search process much more efficient. But it is difficult to fire employees, and firms take great care when they're choosing who to hire. So this is going to raise frictional unemployment as well. The intent of these policies is to make it, a safety net for workers, which means it's more difficult to hire and fire people. But too often, the unintended consequence of these policy changes are ignored, such as prolonged frictional unemployment. Here, which of the following, so the same three examples, which of these is frictional unemployment? The answer is C. Carl's a restaurant chef, and he's unemployed right now because him and his wife just moved to a new city. So he's actively seeking work, and it's just going to take him some time to find the right job. The last category of unemployment is the one that we should be worried about: cyclical unemployment. This is unemployment caused by economic downturn. It's considered the worst kind of unemployment, and it lasts for an uncertain amount of time. Although frictional unemployment is clearly temporary, it disappears when workers begin to get matched with the right job. Structural employment is also temporary. It disappears when the workers take new jobs that are in the newly created industries that were the result of creative destruction. But the duration of cyclical unemployment is open-ended, and it's due to general macroeconomic downturns, so no one knows how long they'll last. Fortunately, in our country, in the United States, most of our downturns, which we call recessions, have been fairly short, with the exception of the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. And we're currently in an uncertain time right now, as you're watching this video, in terms of how long the recession from the COVID crisis is going to last. This really creates a lot of concern among policymakers and economists, because it is the result of an unhealthy economy. Let's first consider the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. Why was unemployment so high? Well, during that period of time, certain industries were hit especially hard as the result of a bubble, or what you might have heard called the housing crisis. This was a situation where a lot of people got into home ownership with mortgages that were not good mortgages to hold, because they were set at rates that the people were not actually going to be able to pay back. And so the housing industry kind of collapsed underneath itself because of these bad loans. There was a long adjustment lag. It took a lot of time to correct the market because it impacted some of the largest banks in our society and their ability to continue to loan funds. And some of the government policies that were introduced had unintended consequences that lengthened the time that people were unemployed. So all of these things together means that it was a pretty bad situation. I myself was one of the people who, I think I mentioned this in the previous video, I was graduating from college during this period of time. And as a new college graduate, I was expecting some frictional unemployment, but I wasn't expecting this. There were no jobs to be had. And so a lot of people that were graduating at that period of time of the millennial generation basically had two options. They had to take jobs in sectors that were considered underemployment. So I had many friends who had a bachelor's degree in neuroscience and started working in the restaurant industry. So it wasn't really a good match, and it was not fully utilizing the skills that they had just learned. Or people like me who decided to just stay and continue their education, hoping for an upturn in the economy. As a result, I didn't end up taking my first real job, my first full-time adult job, until I was 26 years old. So here is a little graphic I found demonstrating how millennials were most impacted by the unemployment as a result of the Great Recession. So people born in the 30s and 40s, these people are called the silent generation. They were affected, but not by much, because many of them were at retirement age or had already retired. And so they were not affected as much by the shortage in jobs available. People born in the 1950s and 60s, but these people are known as the boomers, and they lagged behind, but eventually they were able to make up for those differences by maintaining employment in the long run. The generation just ahead of mine, Gen X, were pretty hard hit by the unemployment during the Great Recession, and they still lag behind to this day. But people in my generation, millennials, specifically the millennials like me, born in the 1980s, we were really disadvantaged because this happened at a time when we were first entering the job force. And so what happened was, like I said, a lot of people didn't get into their actual career for a long period of time. There was a long period of time where they were underemployed or unemployed or still seeking education. And so there was this period of time between when you enter your career and when you actually developed the training and the skills to do that career. So a lot of people in my generation will never reach their full career potential because of that lag that happened right at the time when we were entering the job market. Switching to the current recession that we're in, the COVID-19 impact on unemployment has been huge. As you can see from this graph, this is measuring the unemployment rate adjusted for seasons between August 2019 and August 2021, where we just were. And you can see that the unemployment was a healthy amount, hovering just about at 4%. In the 2019. And then in the beginning of 2020, when we first started experiencing large shutdowns, unemployment shot up to almost 15%. And while it has taken us a long time to get back, but we are on a recovery trajectory. Right now, unemployment is hovering at about 5.4%. To learn a little bit more about the overall economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, I'd like to watch this short video developed by the Harvard Business Review.
If you're worried about the economic toll of the coronavirus crisis, you're not alone. It's scary. There is no clear forecast, and each country's experience will be different. Here's what we do know. A steady flow of money, goods, services, and the people to make them flow is essential to a healthy economy. And that flow is severed right now by life-saving stay-at-home orders. Recession is inevitable, but what kind of recession it will be and what recovery might look like is still unclear. To help imagine what could happen, authors from Boston Consulting Group point out that recessions and their recoveries come in various shock shapes. These are determined by how hard a crisis hits the supply side of an economy. That's an economy's inputs: capital, like machinery, factories, software; labor, or workers; plus productivity, or how we use labor and capital productively. The harder the supply side is hit, the more credit is interrupted, meaning less money is injected in the form of loans to businesses and individuals to fuel investment, and the more difficult it is for productivity to recover. From best to worst, we have V, U, and L recession shock shapes. The V shape is a one-time dip. If credit can continue to flow, productivity and labor are less affected. You can see that growth dips but recovers to its pre-crisis level and rate. The U shape is much more costly. Credit flow is disrupted and growth drops precipitously, never rebounding to its pre-crisis path. The rate of growth recovers, see how the slopes are the same, but a large gap between the old and new paths represents one-off damage to the economy's supply side. The L shape is the worst. Credit is severely disrupted, not once but perpetually, and there is very little new investment. This economy never recovers its prior output path, and the rate of growth also declines. The crisis leaves permanent structural damage to the economy's supply side. These examples represent crises that started in the financial sector, disrupting credit flow and thus capital growth. We have some off-the-shelf policies for dealing with these. However, we are now in uncharted territory with a double risk of a financial system shock and an epic freeze of the real economy, the households, firms, and government that deliver real physical goods and services. Countries have no existing playbook for dealing with this double shock. Months of necessary social distancing raises the risk of both types of problems, which can feed off each other in dangerous ways. For example, a prolonged crisis can drive up real economy bankruptcies of everyday people and firms, making it harder for financial systems to manage. And a financial system crisis would starve the real economy of credit, which could cripple investment and ultimately growth. In this combined crisis, capital does not grow, pushing the economy towards a U-shape. Not good. However, we can head off a U or L-shaped recovery and lessen the intensity of the crisis. How? Primarily, innovation. On the medical side, vaccines, treatments, and capacity innovations are needed to save lives and end the economic damage caused by social distancing. On the economic side, in addition to a vigorous and efficient policy response, we will need policy innovations. For example, in the US, the $2 trillion stimulus bill is just a start. We will need innovative ways to deliver that money to those who need it, since never before have policymakers had to help such large numbers of firms and households. For example, the so-called discount windows that allow unlimited access to funding for the financial sector could be replicated for households and firms in the real economy so that they can stay afloat. Zero-interest bridge loans to households and firms, a moratorium on mortgage payments for residential and commercial borrowers. These are potential solutions that could help make a real difference. The economic goal is to keep our shock shape closer to a V and further away from a U or an L. Speedy, well-executed medical and policy innovations are our best hope to save the most lives and avoid permanent economic damage.
So that's the situation we're in right now. And luckily, we are seeing a lot of those policies being put into effect. So we're in a good place and we hope the trajectory continues. But what it's going to require is that more individuals get vaccinated, because if we allow the virus to continue to replicate inside of people's bodies and therefore mutate, we're going to get these new variants like the Delta variant, which basically knocks out all of the progress that we've made. So the more people that are vaccinated, the less opportunity that the virus has to create new variants. And hopefully we can get to a point where we can fully reopen global economies again. I'm going to pause here and break this video into two pieces so that it's manageable for you. So hold on tight and wait for the second video. I'll see you then.